Good morning.
Good morning.
Okie dokie.
Alexa, timer status. Alexa, timer status. Alexa, what timers are set?
Good morning, everyone. It's Kristen Proud from Commissioner Zucker's office. I think we'll give it just another moment to see if anyone else is able to join us this morning. And we do have most, but not yet quite all of your fellow members. So thank you very much for joining promptly this morning. Dr. Zucker has been called onto a media call with Governor Cuomo, which is wrapping up shortly. And he will join us just as soon as he can. So we'll give it about another 60 seconds, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Rausch Fung, and we'll move to the second item on the agenda first. And as soon as Dr. Zucker comes on, then I know he has a few words that he wants to say as well. So thank you for your patience. And the call just ended, so Dr. Zucker will be joining us momentarily. All right, Dr. Rauschbaum, why don't we go ahead? I'll let you get started with agenda item 2 while Dr. Zucker finishes with the governor. The media call ended, and I think the governor has caught his ear about another issue. So let's go ahead and jump to agenda item number 2.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Great. So I'm just going to pull up, of course I have far too many Word documents open. Let's see, I hope this is the right one. No, that's emails. Excuse me. Nope. Here we go. So hopefully you had a chance to look this over. I sent it out, I apologize, a little bit late yesterday. At last week's meeting, it was mentioned that it would be helpful to have a checklist of materials on the COVID-19 vaccines for task force members to keep track of materials. So I've prepared one here. It's separate pages for each of the 4 vaccines currently in phase 3 clinical trials in the US. So starting with Pfizer's, which as we know, has submitted an EUA and has a meeting of the VRBPAC scheduled on December 10th. They have a publication in the New England Journal of Medicine on their phase 1 and 2 clinical trials. I emailed the manuscript out before the first meeting, but there's also a reference and a link to it online, including its supplementary appendix. Copy to the clinical study protocol for all 3 phases. I believe I had also sent that out. And then the press release that had been released on November 18th that we reviewed at the last meeting. I believe I sent a link before the first meeting, but the link's also here. And I have a little placeholder here later on when the briefing documents are posted, we can add them to that checklist. For Moderna, which hopefully you have heard, they have now issued a press release on their final results. So they have 2 publications in the New England Journal of Medicine on their phase 1 and 2 findings, one in younger and middle-aged adults, and then another in safety and efficacy in adults over 55. Their clinical study protocol, their initial press release, and then yesterday's press release, newly added. AstraZeneca and University of Oxford's vaccine, they have 2 publications in the Lancet on their phase 1 and 2 studies, similar to Moderna, an initial one on younger and middle-aged adults, and then one that compares the safety and immunogenicity in their younger cohorts compared with 55 and older cohorts. Their clinical study protocol, I don't believe I had sent that prior to the meeting. All the links are here and they're all publicly available online, so you shouldn't need subscriptions, but if anyone would like me to email copies of the documents afterwards, I'm happy to do so. And their November 23rd press release. And then finally, just a few documents on our references on Janssen's a vaccine candidate. Janssen is a subsidy of Johnson & Johnson, so sometimes people in the media refer to it as Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. They haven't yet published their results in a peer-reviewed article, but they do have a preprint, not yet peer-reviewed, available on, I believe it's pronounced medRxiv. And so I included a link to their phase 1/2, again, not peer-reviewed article for review, as well as their clinical study protocol, which is available on the Johnson & Johnson website. Janssen Pharmaceuticals vaccine is another adenovirus vectored vaccine similar to the methodology used in the AstraZeneca vaccine. Although unlike the other vaccines in phase 3 clinical trials, they are actually studying potential for a single dose as opposed to 2-dose series. So are there any questions or comments on this checklist or any of the materials or ideas of other things to potentially add to it? Okay.
No, I think this is very useful, Betsy. And do you have a sense as to sort of how many additional vaccine candidates are coming down the pipe after these 4?
So that's a good question. I'd have to do, the New York Times has a really good summary, but it's global vaccines and not all of them are being tested in the US. So I'd have to do a count for the ones that are likely to be available in the US. Novartis has a vaccine that's finished the phase 2 trials in the US that initially I had seen some reports saying that they would start their phase 3 trial in November. I don't believe they did, but
you mean Novavax, right?
Oh my
Novavax.
gosh, Novavax, yes. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Thank you for correcting me on that, Dr. Christine.
Yeah,
That's great.
I was thinking
Yes.
Novartis. I don't think it has
Yeah.
a vaccine. Okay.
No, Novavax,
Novavax.
thank you. So yeah, that presumably, unless something has come up, presumably that vaccine will be starting phase 3 relatively soon. And then I'll have to do some other research on the other ones coming in the US, unless any task force members have anything to add.
Yeah, so Novavax was supposed to start almost now, but he had a little delay for the phase 3, and it will start soon.
Right.
I assume the other one that is coming is the Sanofi GSK.
Right. They're supposed to start last week of December, first week of January. And then there's a Merck product that's coming out also that I know is looking for sites, and that probably won't start for another couple of months, maybe less. And those are the ones that I'm aware of as well.
Hi, this is Deb Log. The Sanofi GSK is starting what in January?
Phase 3.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So it might be worth making a sort of a table of these in sort of approximate sort of time scale, and maybe just a summary of the particular vaccine properties.
So one of the interesting things about the new ones coming, the Novavax vaccine, is with a new adjuvant. So that's something to have in mind.
Is that, Adolfo, is that adjuvant sort of similar to the one that's in the sort of shingles vaccine, or is it?
No, the one in the shingles vaccine is a very well-known adjuvant. So this is a new one.
Okay.
So, I mean, they have done some studies already in humans with this adjuvant, but there is no vaccine that is licensed that contain the particular adjuvant that Novavax is using.
Okay.
Take a step back. I think Howard shows me.
Scott, you're not coming through very well.
Sorry. I was just mentioning, should we back to Dr. Nicole?
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
And by the way, Charlie, I might be wrong, but I think the adjuvant you mentioned, the one for the singles, is the one that will come with the Sanofi GSK. At least the GSK is the provider of the adjuvant for the Sanofi vaccine. And I think it's the same one as the single.
Yeah, well, that's a doozy.
Yes.
I mean, particularly,
Can
right?
you hear me now?
Scott, I'm getting the sort of low bandwidth on your computer thing, so
Okay. I'm gonna change devices, but I was in Dr. Zucker.
Scott, if you're in your office, if you can shut off, or if you're rather doing it at home, if you shut off some of the other open programs, the bandwidth may help. It may help your bandwidth. If you're hardwired in, it's not such an issue. But if you're at home, sometimes I shut off everything else, including my Wi-Fi and my phone, to get more bandwidth in my computer.
Yeah, actually, if you turn off your video, that will help with the bandwidth also, and just do audio.
Hello, is this better?
getting better.
Hello, can you hear? Okay, so I think I've decreased the interference zone. Very sorry about this. So I just was trying to mention that I think Howard Zucker has joined the call, so I thought he wanted to make some comments, and we should give him the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. We just hooked him up to the WebEx, and he is on his way back from the governor's office, so he will join in a couple minutes. So I think if there's no more discussion on this agenda item, we can turn it over to you, Dr. Hammer, and to you, Dr. Rice, to lead us through agenda item 3 regarding the draft templates that we circulated last evening.
That sounds terrific. I think Charlie and I both feel that we wanted to give the ample time to talk today. And in our previous call, we started to get soliciting the opinion of just the impression of the members. I was wondering whether anybody wants to take a few minutes to amplify what they said last time we met last week, or to put in some other opinions, or should we just move to the template? And we need to be efficient because of the topics we have and the time we have. If there's any pressing issues that the committee members have had in the intervening week, to speak up now, because we want to hear from everyone.
Well, I was sort of curious, Scott, on I know that we had Shanakwa Collier, who was not going to be able to sort of serve on the task force. Do we have any update on her replacement?
So, Betsy or Deborah?
We do not have a replacement identified yet. We have several names that we have collected from various sources, and so we're in the process of vetting them and hope to have a decision on that shortly.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if it's in the purview of this committee, but one thing that is bothering me is I've had conversations just this morning with executives from Johnson & Johnson, and as well as reading about Pfizer. And is the state or is these companies going to be responsible for creating what is going to be an extremely important database and digital signature to demonstrate that you have been vaccinated? That information undoubtedly will be very important over the ensuing years. And, you know, whether it's to get on an airplane or to enroll in school will remain to be seen. But I still don't understand who is going to keep that database and how an elderly individual, how we're going to know who's been vaccinated and who has not, and when they've gotten their first vaccine and their second vaccine, and what happens when they don't show up for their second vaccine. And maybe that's not under the purview of this committee, in which case I apologize.
This is Betsy. So the outside of New York City, the state operates the New York State Immunization Information System, or NISIS, and then within the city, New York City Health Department operates the citywide immunization registry. So we're expecting right now that all the doses administered outside of the city will need to be reported to NISIS, and then within the city to the CIR. And we routinely touch base, share data, and so on. I don't know, Deb, is there anything else you would add on that, or?
No, I think this is for those of you who are not familiar, this is a registry, for lack of a better word, but it is an immunization information system that has been in existence for since 2008. And it's very robustly used for childhood vaccines. And there is a law requiring that all childhood vaccines be reported to NISIS, and we're hoping to very soon make it required for all COVID vaccines to be reported to NISIS and the citywide immunization registry in New York. And yes, it's very important that we exchange data with CIR so that whoever shows up for a vaccine anywhere in the state can access this and be able to, that the provider can access it and be able to find out the vaccination status of the person. So far, parents and patients cannot access it directly, but providers can. And we're making enrollment in it a requirement to get vaccine from the state.
So how would a patient prove to a school that they got the vaccine?
Schools have access to read it as well.
Okay.
It's very much used by, all schools, both the universities and primary, secondary. All schools use it very frequently for that purpose.
Does this somehow sort of link to sort of a national database, or is it state by state?
Not yet.
I mean, that seems to be something that's important, because I mean, at some level, we're all in this together, right?
Right. I think that is a vision. Certainly somebody could get vaccinated in New York and then move to California. So
Right.
They will have to, unfortunately, go through their provider in New York to get the information.
That seems like something that maybe the Biden team should try and put in place.
There are people who don't like the idea of their information being shared across the nation. So just there is opposition, but within the state, we're good.
Does this sort of allow any kind of sharing of say, sort of anonymized statistics rather than sort of personalized information?
I mean, can there be anonymized data pulled out of it? Is that what you're asking? Absolutely.
I was sort of wondering again if there's resistance to really sort of putting this all together to see how we're doing as a country, as to whether, in terms of specific individuals, if there was a way of at least sort of merging the sort of statistics from various states to see how the sort of vaccination is going.
Well, this has been done in the past. I don't know if with vaccination, but with medication, for example. So there are databases that takes an anonymous data about medication and clinical records of people, and that's the way how people look, for example, for GWAS or impact of particular medication in something else. So.
Yeah.
Well, CDC is going to collect information from every state, and I'm sure they will be merging it and giving information nationwide about the vaccine program.
Okay.
Should we move on to the comments about the draft document that has been included for the so-called summary, or I think first of all,
Do
people
that. Thank you.
putting this together.
Can you put it up on the share screen so we could all look at it at the same time?
Sure, I'll put it up.
So we appreciate the draft, and this is, people have very little time to look at this, but I think this is a good point at which to comment on what our first impressions are, and to get feedback as to whether this meets everyone's criteria or something that similar can be devised from this. This is a takeoff point for getting this through. So again,
Actually,
committee members,
I see that Howard has appeared.
I'm here. I sure am.
So Howard, did you want some airtime before we get into the nitty gritty here?
Sure, I could do that. Let me just see if we go. I don't want to interrupt if you're in the middle of something, but either way.
We were about to switch to sort of looking at the template specifically, so I guess now would be a reasonable time.
Yep, we were
Perfect.
starting agenda item 3, Dr. Zuckers. Go ahead.
Okay. So I had just a few remarks. I want to thank the task force members again for joining us today. This is really important. This issue keeps becoming bigger and bigger. We've had many a conversation with FDA and CDC since we spoke. I also want to take a quick moment to welcome Dr. Kelvin Lee from Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center and the Jacobs School of Medicine up in Buffalo. Dr. Lee was unable to attend last week's meeting, but he's joined us today. So I thank you. I thank you very much for being here. Additionally, Professor Shanika Collier gives her regrets that she is no longer able to serve on the advisory committee. So the department is recruiting a replacement and doing that actively. As you may have seen, there's been several media outlets reporting that late last week, the first half dose given to participants in AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine phase 3 trial in the UK was in fact an unintentional dosing error. So that was an important point. We were wondering about that, remember? This information is meant to question the validity of the AstraZeneca's previous report of their interim vaccine efficacy analysis. In my own opinion, this situation underscores the importance of the scientific integrity in the vaccine research, the approval, as well as the critical work this task force is doing. Today's meeting will begin with obviously you've already done this, review of the information on the vaccines that are currently in phase 3. And obviously, as we've already been speaking about, to address the development statements from the task force on COVID-19 vaccines. So I saw that the letter has surfaced there. That was a template. So I think it would be good for us to discuss it a little bit more, obviously, and any revisions that you've and again, we'll do a divide and conquer style discussion to look at the data reviews, the drafting statements, and the individual vaccines according to the specific areas of expertise that you all have. And so, in the interest of time, the department has pre-populated information on the Pfizer BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine, but the information may be revised according to all the feedback that you have. And as we discussed last week, time is short. FDA's VRBAC committee meets on December 10th. I've been in touch with FDA, and I'm trying to make sure we finalize the meeting that we are scheduling for December 8th. And when I spoke to Steve Hahn, the governor, I spoke to him, I guess it was on Friday or maybe it was the day before, about this, and we are working to schedule a meeting on that soon. So the task force on December 10th is at 6:30. Would I put that done prior to that? Just hold just for 1 second. Hold on just 1 second. The work won't end once the Pfizer and the BioNTech vaccine is complete. Moderna filed this EUA application yesterday, and AstraZeneca and Janssen Pharmaceutical both have COVID-19 vaccines currently in phase 3 clinical trials. The VRBAC is expected to review the findings on December 17th, though this meeting has not been posted to the public calendars yet. Moderna said its review of safety data. Hold on 1 second. I keep getting a call from the governor's office, so give me 1 second, and I'll be right back. Hold on. Sorry, that's what always happens. Sorry about that. So I want to I want everyone to know the dates that are scheduled already. This the 10th, the 8th for us, the 10th for Burbank, the 17th to review the findings from Moderna. And so I look forward to seeing what the information that you are, and I gather Dr. Rauschwang has gone through the PowerPoint while I was over across the hall with the governor. But if there are specific questions, please let me know. And then also the Clinical Advisory Task Force should already receive the information of how to reach Gary Holmes, who's our Assistant Commissioner for Public Affairs. And if not, his phone number is 518-407-9289. And his email is press@health.ny.gov. So that's 518-407-9289. He always answers. And his email is press@health.ny.gov. So if there's any questions that come up or concerns that surface, just feel free to call him or call me, call Kristen, but we'll make sure you have someone to talk to regarding anything that's generated from the press, because I'm sure they're all going to want to talk to all of you about this. I'm going to stop there, turn it back. I'm going to just find out what the governance team over there wants to ask me, and then I'll bounce right back here in 2 seconds. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll be back.
So let's pick back up with agenda item number 3. Dr. Hammer and Dr. Rice, thank you.
So are you going to be able to project so we can just look through the major headings and see how it strikes us? And one question that's just to inform us about this before we discuss this is, are there criteria, I know you probably put them all in here, but are there criteria that by some regulatory force we need to adhere to or be included in these memos once you put a task force together, and what is the requirement for the output, or is it up to the discretion of the governor's office and Dr. Zucker's office?
Deborah, Kristen, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's up to the discretion of the governor and commissioner. I know the governor mentioned specifically safety and efficacy, but beyond that, I think there's some discretion about the specific criteria and details.
Okay, so just scan through this document and have some et cetera, and why you, I think it'd be obvious why you've included it, and then the group should discuss this, obviously, and we want to get opinions that will help us do what we said we would do the last time. That is, drive to an efficient, as comprehensive as we can make it within the parameters we have, review. But we know that time is of the essence, and there's going to be even more of the essence because there's all of this. What's going to happen on the 8th, the 10th, et cetera, et cetera. And is the FDA going to issue the EUA immediately after the VRBPAC meetings, or give it a day or whatever? So I think we have to be ready to move and to submit this without engendering any delay, should that be our conclusion. So we have to keep that in mind. We don't want to have to go back to a document that's helpful but not crucial to them. If all the data look good, but we need to give us time to think about this. So why don't you just scan through the sections, and I think people can see the elements.
So it starts off with just a kind of basic introductory paragraph explaining that these are the recommendations, the task force has reviewed available evidence, etc. And then, insert the name of the brand for depending on which vaccine, and then I drafted as two options with the specific option, obviously, to be selected by the task force for each vaccine, either recommending that the New York State Department of Health distribute the vaccine to state healthcare providers for administration, or refrain from distributing it pending further release of data, and then including a statement that the task force reserves the right to modify or retract the recommendation in the future if necessary. Following that, I have a section for various findings of the task force. So first, summary, basic information on the vaccine, its type or mechanism, dosing, virology, paragraph summarizing phase 1 and 2 safety and efficacy study findings, pardon me. A bit more detail on phase 3, number of participants, proportion in vaccine versus placebo group, different age distribution, and I'm certainly open to feedback on, whether that's too much or not enough detail. And then paragraph on safety and efficacy findings. At the last meeting, there was some discussion of specifically talking about use in children, adolescents, and pregnant women. So I added some placeholders there that may or may not apply to all vaccines depending on the populations included. But, I heard from the last meeting that was important to consider. And then a paragraph on the VRBPAC recommendations, details on the emergency use authorization. So these 3 paragraphs are just kind of going back to summarizing what the federal government did. Paragraph on the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices recommendations. And then a final concluding paragraph reiterating the recommendation and that the task force may issue additional statements in the future if more data comes out, and if and when other vaccines are authorized. And then room for all the task force members to sign it. Feedback?
So thank you for bringing this very important thing to revise and get to a final product. I just have one opening comment, and I'd like to open it up to the committee so we can give you what people think about this. The comment is on the brief lines that have, on phase 1 and phase 2 should be those and immunogenicity and not efficacy. So, which is reserved for formally for the phase 3 trial, 2B or 3. So it's not,
Yeah, that's
the descriptor is, so anyway, Charlie, any other comments?
No, I think this is, very, very good outline. I guess the sort of one thing that I think a number of us were sort of copied on this email by somebody who is sort of concerned about sort of not these details, but the sort of compliance with manufacturing practices. Maybe we can bring that up for discussion at the end. I'm not sure that that's, I guess this person was concerned that there was a shortcut being taken there in terms of really sort of inspecting, production facilities and quality control. I don't know how accurate that, perspective was. Nobody wants to comment on that, I guess.
Yeah, no, yes, I just don't know also the details. I know that all GMP clinical grade production facilities need to be going through an inspection from the FDA to be approved as a place that they know, but I have no idea what regulatory processes they have been gone for getting the okay from the FDA as this being. I think that should be in the IND material, I assume, but I don't know.
Yes, and that information will be in the BLA that will be subsequently submitted. And I would suspect again also that I agree that facilities will be inspected by the FDA. But some of these are being built,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah, they don't need to be inspected all the time. They just need to have comply with an inspection at a particular time. Yeah, that's as far as I know.
and some things have come up for certain manufacturers where what is really important. And they have to reassure that there's no manufacturing glitches and purity issues in the products. So I think this is well in hand, but it's not or do not have to do anything with that except for receive the information from the agency, the FDA, and read as we can about the reports.
Yeah. So in general, you need this approval for the clinical trial, not for the analyzing the data of the clinical trial. The vaccines will not go to the clinical trial without making sure that they have complied with regulatory issues that they need to have in terms of the toxicity of the material, the GMP production of the material, and the manufacturing of the material. It's more about approval of the clinical trial that actually the vaccine results.
Right, but I guess when you actually sort of scale up to, sort of manufacture a product for an EUA or an approved thing, then presumably all of those, sort of, yes, you have to do it in an approved sort of GMP facility, but there are also some, batch to batch, sort of quality controls that need to be implemented.
Yeah, but the requirements are not as strict as for the clinical trials. They need to have a potency and a quality assay that qualify the product for release when they are being manufactured.
I think
and I don't know what are the criteria for qualification for release, but this should be included in the licensure if the ones are the license.
I mean, I think we all agree or need to admit that there are risks here that we cannot dismiss. Unfortunately, the situation that we're in outweighs those theoretical risks. The FDA approval won't come for 6 months. We're doing this based on 2-month data. And the gearing up by the industry is basically unprecedented. And so, it's about 1,000 people are dying a day.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and
but I assume that these particular issues they have been taken care. Here the issue about use of emergency versus not use of emergency has to do with the time that the people are being followed up for potential adverse events. But I think manufacturing, I don't think they are being cut corners. But I'm not familiar with all the details.
Yeah, I think, sort of along the sort of lines of what was just brought up in that sort of concluding paragraph, Betsy, again, for sort of recommending that something be implemented, and an acceptable safety profile, maybe, and a currently acceptable safety profile, which, sort of is emphasized later on that we can sort of, depending upon additional sort of data, we could, sort of retract that recommendation if something is shown to be unsafe.
Yeah, and perhaps that they are the population also in the last paragraph, right? Because they have not yet done clinical trials in kids, for example.
Yeah.
Other comments as you scan through this, and you obviously have more time to read it over and to send in any.
I only have one more comment, which is the document is written, which I think hopefully will be like that the recommendation is going to be positive. If the recommendation is negative for whatever reason, it should be a clear reason why it's negative, and that's what should be emphasized. But yes, that's a comment.
It's a comment, thank you, because I think what we have to plan is if a glitch happens and we are tending toward a negative comment. A template will only go so far. We'll have to really put our heads together and have a late night.
Yeah.
That decision. So, but it's important to keep your nutrition up and your sleep the night before up, and so we can do that if we need to. But thank you.
So your understanding is that every time we have something that goes through the EUA approval process and or ACIP, we'll put out a new letter. So assuming like we've got the Pfizer one coming down first, this letter will be specific to Pfizer. And then when we have the next letter or Moderna coming through next, we're going to do a Moderna letter.
That's the plan, as I understand it, for these first 4 to 6 vaccines.
Okay.
So the warp speed vaccines, I think.
Right. So I guess the only concern that I have is the Pfizer supposedly vaccinated some adolescents, but the Moderna did none. It may be important that we, when we are talking about those age groups, that we somehow draw attention to the fact that they're different. So people don't think of it as a template, oh yeah, it's 12 and up, it's 12 and up, because they're going to be different.
Yeah, that will be the age group that is recommended by the
So
FDA emergency use authorization.
Really cautious to make sure that everyone looks at it and pays attention to those differences.
Yeah, and I think that the emergency use from Pfizer does not include yet the data with adolescents. They will include it later on.
Right, because they didn't have enough adolescents to really say enough about it. That was the problem.
Yeah.
So I would actually also add one thing at the risk of generating more work for myself. I actually think that, or myself and my colleagues, in the findings of the task force, I think that there should be a separate section that talks about the immune responses, because I don't think that that has a huge impact in terms of whether or not the vaccine is safe and efficacious within that 2-month framework. But I think this will come when we get to 6 months as to whether or not the vaccine immune responses actually are durable, and if there are different immune responses in different population categories. So I think as a place marker for the letter to put that in there, because we may, I think it's a reasonable thing to summarize what that immune response data looks like at this point. So we have it as a place marker going forward, because then the question comes up, do you need to reboost every 6 months or every 3 months or every year? Or how long does the protection last? And I think the immune parameters will allow us to look at that. In addition, as I emailed Betsy earlier, Moderna has used this particular mRNA platform in a phase 1 vaccine trial for influenza. And this was back in 2019. So they may actually have data that's a year as to how good the immune responses have lasted for that vaccine using this particular technology platform. The antigen's obviously different, but we might get some idea of what sort of the long-term responses. I had heard informally that the immune responses for the Moderna influenza vaccine started to fall off fairly dramatically after 2 months. Now, again, I have not seen that published anywhere, so I don't know how true that was. But this was a colleague that does a lot of vaccine work and preclinical monkey vaccine work. So it is something that I think we should put in the letter as a place marker, just so we remember that that is something that we may, that we actually considered that, whether, again, I think from a public health standpoint, how often you have to sort of reboost people to maintain protective immunity is going to be an issue as the vaccine rolls out further. So that's something that I am perfectly, I'm willing to sort of try to pull out of the various documents that they've got out there already.
Yeah, but I think this is still too speculative. We don't know yet what is the level of protection, the level of, how do you correlate the level of antibodies in sera with protection? And comparing flu with coronavirus is not a good comparison, because the antigens are different, the level of pre-existing immunity, and how this may actually contribute to memory responses with specific epitopes of flu versus this one that has less cross-reactivity, although it has some cross-reactivity with other coronaviruses. I
So
think it's too early to start talking like that. I think the most important thing is to say what the vaccine does is proof that it does.
Right.
So the vaccine does not prove that it prevents asymptomatic infections. It does not prove that you will not be able to get infected and infect other people. The vaccines, what they know, the way they have been studied at this moment is that they prevent clinically COVID-19, diagnosed COVID-19. So clinical symptoms that results in COVID-19 diagnosis. And I think that's quite important because that gives you also what you expect from this vaccine, right?
Right. So I wouldn't say that the immune section wouldn't be making any conclusions. I think it's just as a summary of what the data is, because I think the thing that we don't know is how long the protection lasts, right? I mean, we know that acutely you have protection. I think that we don't know how long it lasts, simply because the vaccines haven't been out there long enough to actually say how durable is immunity. So I would say in the letter, that's just a place marker that says that we, based on the data, we don't know. And maybe in 6 months we will. And I agree with you completely. I wouldn't make any conclusions that the immune response correlates with protection. I mean,
so that's what I meant. We can say what this vaccine is supposed to do.
Right.
Supposed to provide protection at this particular time after vaccination from clinically manifestations of COVID-19.
Right.
That's what they are supposed to do at this moment.
Right.
Perhaps they provide long-lasting protection, perhaps not.
Right.
Perhaps they provide protection from infection, perhaps not.
Right. So I would just put that in there just simply as, from the task force recognition that, so if this gets out in the public, which I suspect it will, the task force is not saying, oh, you get vaccinated once and you're good for the rest of your life. I would put that in as sort of the scientific sort of review of why this might not be true or why it might be true. But these are the things that going forward, we would need to sort of continue to monitor in addition to sort of reinfection rates, right? And I think that, and then have the immune correlates there. So maybe we can actually develop immune correlates that will tell us what the level of protection is going to be. And it just serves as a place marker. It's not any conclusion, but at least we can summarize the current data about that and then say, well, all right, these are the pieces that are missing that we can't, make any real conclusion about long-term protection at this point, even based on an immunologic correlate we don't know. So.
Yeah, but I think it goes even beyond that. So, for example, some people may expect that if you get vaccinated, you don't need to do social distancing anymore, even if there is a lot of spread of the virus. And say, why should I use a mask? Why should I have social distancing? I'm vaccinated. I'm protected. I don't need that. And that's not the case. And that, because you still could be transmitting the virus if you get infected.
Sure.
So it sounds to me like maybe this, sort of, if we're talking about sort of Betsy's sort of template here, when we talk about sort of summaries of vaccine type, dosing and virology, we should maybe say something about sort of the immune response as well. But without, sort of getting into anything, specific about what that means.
Yeah, this could be done by saying what the vaccine doesn't do, right? So that's the way to do it. They say the task force recognized that the vaccine does not, we don't know whether the vaccine provides you with long-lasting protection. We don't know whether the vaccine provides you from infection from asymptomatic infection, and that it prevents the ability to people to become infected and reinfect other people. It may or may not.
In the studies to date, there has been no evidence of active infection, correct? In those who achieved immunity after vaccine, meaning there was no suggestion that they had an active infection after they got.
For the vaccination, the way it was done is if you get symptoms, then they do a diagnosis. But if you don't have symptoms, then you are not being diagnosed. There is no diagnosis every 2 days to figure out whether the people get infected or not. So
are they doing sort of serology follow-up on that, Adolfo, or not?
And the serology is also complicated, right? Because some people they have antibodies before the trial, even though if they was diagnosed COVID-19, it was an exclusion, and that's because they were asymptomatic and they were never diagnosed, and they have antibodies. And unless you are doing, which I don't think they are doing, DIVA assay, differentiation of infected versus. So, for example, if they develop antibodies against ORF6, then we know that there was infection, right? I don't think they are doing this right now at the moment in the clinical trials.
Okay. Okay, well, maybe you and Kelvin could come up with some well-considered language to sort of have in our sort of draft template for that.
So we're getting. I want to ask Dr. Zucker if he's still on the call. Does he have any comments? And because we have to stop on time.
I'm right here. I'm listening. I think it's a great discussion. I think the issue of immunity and how long it lasts is going to be a big question. It's going to also impact how you decide who gets it, and in that, although you brought up about the fact that the public's going to perceive that I got my vaccine, so why do I have to do all these public health precautions and the fact that they can transmit it. So I think these are great points.
Maybe we should. Do you want to go over where we go from here, and the dates so that you find the next step, so that anybody with questions just raise them now. But this is our opportunity to stay unified.
I think after we finish this exercise, at some point, I don't know whether it would be of value to us, but we have a lot of convincing to do, even among healthcare workers now. Over 60% of them, and I've surveyed my own healthcare workers, are not going to agree to take this vaccine. And I think that this is going to be a major issue. And quite frankly, I don't think the CDC and New York State Department of Health announcements is going to go far enough. I would suggest, and again, I don't want to get sidetracked, but maybe the Department of Health could get together a bunch of celebrities and other people to do a campaign all across communities of color and other locations, people who are credible, as opposed to it coming from larger organizations.
We are working on that. I have to tell you, the most credible people are sitting right here on the phone. So you guys are the experts.
I'm happy to help, but I have to tell you that I was.
We want people that are going to be recognized by the public as not sort of scientists and clinicians.
I know. It's like, let's take it.
I think this is where you need to pull out your sort of connections with the New York celebrities and ask if they'll sort of line up and roll up their sleeves.
Off the sleeve.
I mean, happy to be vaccinated live on television together with the
I actually volunteered to do that for our public news station. I said I would get vaccinated on the 6 o'clock news, and the news anchor could vaccinate me if this task force thought that the vaccine was safe and efficacious. So
I have done the same, but I will tell you, I was driving west on the Long Island Expressway this weekend through Queens, and there was an enormous sign up that said, "COVID manufacturers have immunity. Be careful."
So I guess we need to sort of decide very quickly on the sort of next path forward. So, I mean, I think we sort of have the template and maybe a few modifications in that we're talking about. Sort of we need to think about a template which would, and it could either be the same or a different one that might cover the sort of possible case where, we're not recommending a particular vaccine candidate for use. And we also have the partially filled out template that Betsy has already provided for the sort of Pfizer vaccine that basically we need to embellish. So I think actually that is, sort of maybe making some revised versions on these, sort of based on our discussions today. And then maybe planning as the sort of next vaccine candidates march along here, sort of Moderna being next, would be to then create, sort of a vaccine candidate specific template that we have, that we can sort of consider in advance of when the drop dead, sort of deadline is for making this announcement. And if we need to convene a meeting to sort of do that, I guess we'll have some experience with the sort of Pfizer vaccine coming up. That'll be our maiden run on this.
And one thing to include in the template also, before I forget, is whether we were all agree with the recommendation. I think that also helps, right?
Yeah.
Unanimous.
We are going to be in favor, so unanimously, or 5 out of 6, whatever.
Yeah.
Right, dissenting opinion, no dissenting opinion, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we do have a dissenting opinion, that's probably going to be not good for vaccine implementation. But
I don't think that will happen, right? But
You gotta say no.
it's gonna look good if we say that we all agree with this.
We have to be open about this and honest with it among ourselves. So I think that's why we keep bringing it up. Hopefully we'll be easily unanimous, but if not, I think we have to hear that out and
get correct. Yeah.
And get it corrected. So if we can.
Yeah.
And I think we'll all learn from that experience, and that's what we're here for. So.
And ACIP is meeting today, so we can certainly see stuff tonight as to what they say.
Yes, thank you. That's a good point. And everyone's being very flexible, as they should, as far as getting their organizations to fit this timelines. If this happens, and it happens to work out, this will be just a dramatic 10 months of amazing 10 months in virology, and this is an illness and a successful preventive. So it'll be historic, but let's not get too wound up in that sort of aspect of this. But this will be good. It's great that we have good data, and we'll see the strength of that data. But the numbers that are coming through so far as number of cases, the level of protection, the 2 vaccines that we're looking at first, is quite remarkable. And we shouldn't get complacent about it, because we haven't seen the other data that we need to think about, as far as it's not J&J, it's the other vaccine. Well, the AZ vaccine. I think that's we don't know. Those numbers we're going to have to also go over when they're ready, but they're going to be delayed a little bit and to get back on track. But we'll have different discussions down the line. So and there's also implications for the ability to get a correlative protection across the trials. And hang on a second. Okay. So I'm just been interrupted for a second. So anyway, I think that this discussion sounds pretty straightforward, but it's going to get more complicated for sure. And as well as the effect of these successes on the subsequent vaccines and the clinical trials. So we have our work cut out for us. It's all for the good. So anyway, those are my comments, and I just turn it back to Betsy and Deborah. Have other comments for us, or at least note the next time we convene?
When is the next time, Betsy?
Time that we convene will be hopefully on December 8th. We are still working with the FDA to get a time for the discussion with the FDA on the Pfizer vaccine clinical trial data. And then, of course, we do have the meeting on the 10th which we had originally thought would be around 5 p.m., but we've moved it to 6:30 since it appears that VRPAC's meeting is scheduled from 9 a.m. to at least p.m. And I understand they have a track record sometimes of running long. So we've tentatively moved that one to 6:30 p.m. on December 10th. But I think the idea would be to convene very shortly after the VRPAC meeting concludes that evening. And we will, of course, keep you posted on the time for the December 8th discussion with the FDA.
Do you have a guess as to sort of when that might be on the 8th?
I don't yet.
Unfortunately,
I'm trying to, I've called the commissioner a couple times and I haven't heard back. And I texted him while we were on this call just now and tried to get some info on that.
Yeah, I'm going to be sort of
Just good.
out of action for about a 4 or 5 hour chunk from 4 in the afternoon until 7 or 8 that evening.
All right. Well, maybe I'll deal with the first thing in the day. So
Yeah.
if we have questions, we have some time to get our answers. All right.
And Betsy, for the FDA meeting on the 8th, are we going to get documents in advance of that, or is this all going to be, a Zoom meeting? Will we see anything before that?
For the 8th, any information that goes to the VRPAC committee is going to come to the committee here. So any public information that they get, we will have.
Okay.
Other final questions or comments? So we very much appreciate everyone getting together for this call, the work that's been done in to supply us with information to move us along, and the committee members in particular. Thank you for thinking so hard about this. And
the
Charlie?
last meeting I wanted to note is December 17th. We have tentatively scheduled a meeting that evening with this group, presuming that VRPAC will follow a similar time schedule for their consideration of the Moderna vaccine.
Yeah.
We have not seen a public posting of the December 17th meeting, but Moderna and others have indicated to us that VRPAC is likely to convene on December 17th for that consideration. So we've put a hold on your calendars for that evening.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.